Let me share my screen and show you what we're trying to build with Timo3. So bear with me a second while I get my screen organized here. So I have, let me bring up I think this is it. Let me get the Zoom controls out of the way. So this is the repo for the starter code for Timo3. And as you can see, I have an open pull request right now. And that open pull request actually has a failure on it. And the failure is the mutation testing. As an aside, if the staff are interested in taking a look at that failed mutation testing and trying to address it, that would be awesome. But in the meantime, I'm going to just kind of forge ahead. So this is almost ready. This pull request is almost ready to merge. The thing I want to show you is that we actually do practice what we preach. I'm showing you a pull request here, and I have an overview of what's in the pull request. Updates to the use backend functionality that make it easier to see what's happening when backend errors occur. Updates to the node version to bring it up to date, and adding ESLint back into the build. I'm saying exactly what we're doing in this, in this pull request. But let me turn right now to the deployment of this on Heroku. So I have a deployment of this starter Timo3. And if I open the app, and I'm already logged in. I'll go ahead and log out so you can see that OAuth login is working here. And on the menu here, I have, oh, that's interesting. Okay, yes, I do have it. I have UCSB dates. And if I go to the list, you can see there's nothing in there right now. But if I go to create and I put in, for example, 2022-1, that would be winter quarter. And I put in, let's say, President's Day. And then I put in, let's say, 2022-02. I have no idea what President's Day is, but let's just assume that it's the 15th. 0000. So that would be midnight on President's Day, and I do create. Now you can see that is in the table. And if I go and edit this, I can say President's Day, maybe, and you can see that the edit works. Now, what this is a front end on top of the back end. And if I go to Swagger UI index.html, you'll see that here we have in the back end that UCSB dates controller. And this looks very similar to what you built in Timo2. Now, we also have in here this UCSB dining commons controller, and we don't yet have a front end for that. So what I'm going to do, what I'm going to show you right now is how you would build that front end a little bit at a time. So I'm going to start by going to the root of the repo. So here's starter Timo3. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a get status. And we'll see the branch I'm on right now is PC update, use backend error handling. That's the branch I've been working on to get your starter code ready. I'm going to branch off of this branch for what we're about to do. So I'm going to do get checkout -b PC. And let's do add dining commons menu placeholder. So the first thing I want to do is, let me go back to the home page here. You can see that we have on the navigation bar, we have these menus here. Now the UCSB dates menu has a list option and it has a create option. And what we're going to do today is we're going to do dining commons list. We're going to make dining commons list work. If I look at to-dos, you'll see that to-dos right now just has two placeholders. The first thing I'm going to do is, and this is going to match how you're going to work in Timo3, is I'm going to add to the menu a placeholder. To-dos, this is where the index page will go. I'm going to add a similar placeholder for the UCSB dining commons. So here's how that works. First, I'll bring up the repo in VS Code. And let's take a look at the structure here. If I close up all these directories, you'll see that most of this looks familiar. Here's the source directory where you've been doing all the Java coding, and it's divided into main and test. And there's the controllers and the services and the entities and repositories. But we're not going to concern ourselves with any of that right now. We're going to close up that entire source directory. And we're going to instead open up this front end directory. And under front end, there is also a directory called source. And it has under it fixtures, main, stories, and tests. And what we're going to do right now is go into main, and we're going to go into components. So the front end framework that we're using is called React. And in React, what you build are components. Components are a part of your user interface. And the component that does the navigation is this app navbar component. And so I'm going to go into this app navbar, and I'm going to look for the to-dos part, and here it is right here. And what this is saying is, if you have the role of a user, we're going to see this. This is how we make it so that you see the navbar when you're logged in, and you don't see it when you're not logged in. So in this code base, you can tell whether you're logged in or not, because if you're logged in, then has role current user role user will be true, and if you're not logged in, it will be false. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this little block of code right here. Has role current user. If we are logged in, we're going to make a nav dropdown, and we're going to call it UCSB Dining Commons. And one of the things I need to do in React, in order to be able to test things, is I need to give this an ID, and I also need to give it the same data test ID. So this is a place where you just kind of want to follow the leader, follow the convention that you already see in the code. So I'm going to call this app navbar, instead of to-dos dropdown, we'll call it dining commons dropdown, and I'll do the same thing over here, app navbar, dining commons dropdown. Whenever you see ID, that typically implies that it needs to be unique. So we need to make sure that there's nothing else in this app that's called app navbar dining commons dropdown. But that's pretty safe bet, because the only place we would put app navbar is in this file. And as long as we make sure it's unique within this file, we're probably in good shape. Now this is where we're going to link to a route. These routes have not yet been defined. I'll show you how to define them in a minute. We're not going to do create yet, so I'll leave create out. But we'll call this dining commons list, and we'll say list dining commons. Now, at first, this will add it to the navbar, but if I try to actually go to that page, I'll get an error because it doesn't exist. But that's at least a good start. So that's kind of our small increment of change. Let's go over here and do a get status, and I see that I've got one modified file. If I do a get diff, it will show me that's the change. That looks pretty good. That looks like how I want it to look. So how do we test this? So to test on localhost, now that we have a front end and a back end, what we need to do is start them up separately. So I'm going to start, let me actually close all the other windows here so I don't get too confused. I'm going to leave this, tab open. I'm going to terminate that and terminate this, and yes, okay. So now I've got just this one tab open. What I'm going to do now, if you're on Windows or if you're doing the terminal inside of VS Code, you'll have to do this in whatever way works for you. As a Mac user using just plain terminal, if I do Command-T, what's very convenient is that I get another terminal window in the same directory. So that's really convenient. I'm going to make two of these. I'm going to have one window where I'm doing all of my Git operations and edits and so forth. Then I'm going to have a window here where I run the back end with Maven Spring Boot Run. Then I'm going to have a second window here where I run the front end with npm start. So npm is node package manager, and start is the command that will start up the front end. Now I do npm start. Oh, I forgot one important thing. Before I do npm start, I need to cd into the front end directory. Now I can type npm start. Okay, so I have in this, let me go back to the terminal so we can see what's going on. In this window, I've done in Maven Spring Boot Run, and I've started the back end, and you can see that it's up and running. In this window, I started the front end, and you can see that it is up and running. And the front end is running on localhost 3000. And when you fire this up, it will automatically open a web browser on localhost 3000. And there is that web page. There's a big yellow warning at the top saying, yeah, this is probably not what you want. You really want localhost 8080. Because what's happening here is this is only the front end of your application. And there's not a whole lot you can do with the front end of this particular application separate from the back end. So if we go over here to localhost 8080, this is the back end, but, now this is a little confusing, what happens is when you hit the back end, if you ask for any route other than the API routes and the Swagger routes, it will go and get those from the front end server and serve them up here. So all of these front end pages are actually coming from that server over on localhost 3000, but we're seeing them here. So I can log out, log back in, and I see there is my UCSB Dining Commons menu, the one that I added, and it has list dining commons. And if I go to it, I just get a blank page because that page doesn't exist yet. But at least this is progress. So I might come over here and do get status. I do get add dot get commit -m added navbar link for UCSB Dining Commons. And then I will get push origin, and then this is my PCAD Dining Commons placeholder. Now, here's something that you may not have seen before. I'm going to add -u. What -u does is it sets the upstream, and that's kind of fancy Git terminology. You can think of it this way. It sets origin PCAD Dining Commons placeholder menu as the default, so that next time all I have to do is do get push, and it will automatically go to origin PCAD Dining Commons menu placeholder. Saves me a lot of typing. So -u will set that default until you set it to something else. All right, so we've pushed that change. Now that we have that working, what we want to do is make it so that that actually goes somewhere. So just like this to-dos, list to-dos goes to a placeholder page, we want this to go to a placeholder page. So for that, we're going to come back to VS Code, and let's look at the way this code is structured. So I'm going to come over here, and let's look again under front end. You see I have the source directory, and under source I have fixtures, main, stories, and tests. We're still under main, and I have components, layouts, pages, and utils, which is utilities. What we want to create right now is a page. Now, I mentioned before that in React you build components. Pages are a special case of a component. What's the difference? Well, a page is a page in your web app. Components are typically a part of the page, and they're a part of the page that can be reused across multiple pages. So because pages are special, we keep them in a separate directory. And you can see that I have under pages, I have a few pages that are at the top level, the admin users page, the home page, and the profile page. But the pages for particular database collections, I'm keeping under their own directory just to keep everything organized. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a new directory here, or a new folder for Dining Commons. And then I'm going to look under to-dos. I have this to-dos index page, and you can see that this is a nice example of a placeholder page. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go under Dining Commons. I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to call it Dining Commons Index Page.js. Now, the name index page is actually one that I borrowed from a web framework called Ruby on Rails, which is one of the sort of the early web frameworks that tried to have a nice standard way of organizing a web app. A lot of frameworks leave it up to you, the developer, to choose all the names and the organization of your folders and files, which is great. It's great freedom. But with that great freedom comes the fact that everybody does it a different way. So we have to have some standard, and I figured using a standard that's already pretty well established is a good idea. So the index page in the Rails framework is the one that provides you a list of all the records in your database. That's kind of the default. So that's why we're calling it an index page. Now, import basic layout from main layouts, basic layout. This, oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. The idea is that all of the pages in your web app typically have a certain layout. There's a navigation bar at the top, there's a page, and then there's a footer at the bottom. So that's what that is. That's basically saying this page will be laid out the same as all the other pages. If you needed to have an alternate layout in your web app for some reason, some page that was really fundamentally different from all the rest, you could have multiple layouts, but in this case we only have one. Export default function to-dos index page, we will change that to dining commons index page. Then return in React. What you have is JavaScript code, but then as inside a return statement like this, you can go into what is basically HTML. Sort of. It's sort of HTML. This basic layout is basically indicating that we're going to pick up from basic layout a component, and then this is going to be the content of that basic layout. I will put up here dining commons, and then this is where the index page will go. This class name equals pt2 is referring to a CSS class that is part of React Bootstrap. If you understand what that means, great. If you don't worry about it for right now. It basically, though, has to do with the appearance of this on the page. So that's our basic sort of placeholder. Now that we've got that in place, you might think, well, gosh, now we're ready to go. We can just rerun this, and when we go to that link, it'll go to this page. That is, however, not the case. There's one more piece we have to do. If you remember when we looked at this app on localhost, the to-dos, list to-dos goes to this page. UCSB Dining Commons tries to go to this page, but then the page isn't there. What we've just done is we've created the code for this page, but we have to link that code to this route. Where do you do that? You link routes to pages in a file called app.js. So let me take a moment. I want to go to the lecture notes for today. And in the lecture notes for today, I sort of wrote, oops, not there, here. I wrote a summary of some of the things that I thought we would cover today, but that one I didn't include. So let me put this in here. Let me put in that where do you map pages to routes in React? In our React app, pages are mapped to routes in the file frontend/app.js. Now I'm pretty sure that's right. Let me just double check. Let's go to visualstudio.code. So we're under front end. Let me close up source. Actually, I'm incorrect. It's under source, but it's outside of, there it is. Okay, it's under source, and it's capital app.js. So let me fix that in the lecture notes. It's front end, source, and then capital app.js. And I'll give an example here. And let me go ahead and just save that in the lecture notes. And then let me come back in so we can paste in that example. And let's go look at app.js. And here's what app.js looks like. What you see is that depending on the role you have, we will map certain URLs to certain components. And here is where you see if you are logged in as a user, here are some routes for to-dos. What we'll do is we'll take this block of code, we'll copy and paste it, and then I'll fix the formatting. And then I'll say, if you're logged in as a user, we want to be able to list all of our dining commons. So I'll say path dining commons list, and then this is where we will do dining commons index page. Now, dining commons index page is the name of a React component. How does it know where to find that? Up at the top, you have to import each of these. So you can see here we imported to-dos index page. In a similar way, I'm going to import dining commons index page, and that comes from main pages, dining commons, and then, oops, let's fix that, dining commons / dining commons index page. Okay, so if we have all of our names right, now in app.js, we now have mapped our route. First of all, we've imported our component, dining commons index page. So let's go ahead and look and make sure that this matches up. Under main components, oh, I don't see dining commons here. Where did dining commons go? Are we in the right repo? Didn't I put in a, let's see, oh, that's right, pages, not components. Okay. So under pages, dining commons index page. There it is. Okay, so once again, let's look at app.js. Let me get my zoom controls in the right spot here. So in app.js, main pages, dining commons index page. Here is main pages, dining commons index page. And then we have, here's the blue in VS Code shows us that this is what's edited since our most recent commit. We've mapped dining commons list to that element. Now we need to make sure that on our nav bar, this route matches the route that we set up. So let's go and look under components nav app nav bar, and you can see that there is a mismatch. Here I have dining commons with a lowercase c, so let's fix that to make that uppercase C, because this route here in the link needs to match the route in my app.js. So I'm going to switch over to app.js. There's the route, and now that route matches the one that's in my app navbar. So now it should work. Let me just pause and see if there are any questions. Okay, so I don't see any questions yet, but I'll ask Andrew to continue to monitor the chat for those. Let's go ahead and come back over here to front end. If we do a get status, we can see we have some modified files. If I do a get diff, I can see that in my app.js, I'm importing dining commons index page. I've added in the mapping of that path to the component for the page, and that matches what I've got in my nap draft down. And then get status, the new file is my dining commons index page. Let's go ahead and do get add dot on all of these. Actually, I should test it really first before I do the commit. So let's do that. I still have my front end, or sorry, my back end running, and I still have my, do I have my front end running? I don't. So let's do npm start here. Typically, you don't need to restart the back end, and often you don't even need to restart the front end. It will pick up the changes on the fly. Let's go over to localhost. Let's go to UCSB Dining Commons, list dining commons, and indeed, you can see that there, list dining commons, the page is showing up. So That's not a formal test. We're going to go into how we do formal testing of this in a moment, but at least an informal test, it appears to work. So I will come back to get here, and I'll get to get status. I will do get commit minus m pc. Put my initials at the start of my commit. Added placeholder page for Dining Commons index. Get push. And I don't have to say get push origin PC add dining commons menu placeholder, because earlier I did get push origin PC add dining commons menu placeholder minus u, so just get push is sufficient.